Well, now Don DeBar, an activist and journalist in New York, joins me live via broadband to discuss this story. Mr. DeBar, so we're hearing the protesters are continuing their action. We've heard that not just in New York, but in other states as well. Does this have a chance of growing into a nationwide movement?
Already doing that. If you go to occupytogether.org, the website that lists the actions around the country, you'll see that in Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles, other places, they've already had hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of people out in the streets this past weekend, aside from what happened in New York. And the most interesting part of it is that they're not just marching, they're holding people's congresses, or what they're calling general assemblies, where they are sitting down and allowing everyone involved to help them assemble a list of demands which they then intend to make. Now, historically, when that's happened, I was just reading a piece that was published in Moscow, actually, 94 years ago, this past July, that begins, if you drive nature out of the door, she will rush back through a window. And your reporter, Marina, was right that people have no confidence now in their economic structure, and they're in horrible economic straits. No confidence in the political structures. I mean, the polling data for Congress is between 15 and 20% positive. The condition is such that 65% were polled as saying that they have less than $1,000 in case of an emergency in terms of net worth, and they have no health care. This movement is being joined by unions this past weekend in New York City, and coming up, even the Working Families Party in New York is planning this Wednesday to join with the protesters, and also student organizations around the country are starting to organize both with the protesters in their city downtowns and also on campuses. This has the potential, in the environment of where people are frightened and have no confidence in their structures, of becoming explosive.
Okay, well, as this continues to grow, as what you're saying, you will also be seeing a lot more police on the ground. And the internet, for example, is abuzz with videos of what were violent scenes on Wall Street and the Brooklyn Bridge. What do you make of the police response?
Well, the most important thing is what's going to be the impact that it has. And see, before, many of these people who are now hurting, that were formerly middle class or believed they were middle class while they were spending borrowed money, are starting to feel the wrong end of a billy club, or seeing their kids feel the wrong end of a billy club. And so what they saw before, when minority kids were getting beat up on television or others, as something alien to them, they're going to internalize it very quickly, and you're going to see a huge turnaround, I think, in the public's perception of where they stand in relation to the power structure, as a direct consequence of the police beating people up who are making legitimate demands, basically, for the right to live in security.
Okay, let's look at media coverage. You yourself, you're a journalist. Well, right after the showdown on Brooklyn Bridge, I mean, there have been some people, we have had them on the show as well, claiming that the mainstream U.S. media didn't seem too interested. I mean, what is your take on that? Was media coverage commensurate with what was happening on the streets?
I'll say, first of all, thank God for RT.com, and because the coverage here has been horrible to the extent that it's been covered at all. It's been covered either as like a football game contest, or as, there's violence there and it's imputed to the protesters. The part that's useful to keep in mind, however, is that the media here have already spent their capital in terms of people believing what they have to say. Over the last 10 years, politically, dealing with Iraq and Afghanistan and all of that, and particularly since the economic collapse in 2007, 2008, what comes out of the box does not correspond to people's realities. And so they've been looking at alternative media, and they have a direct feed. Right now there's 6,000, 6,500 people around the world watching directly from the cameras in New York City what's going on there, and the other places are doing the same thing. So the media doesn't really matter as much as it did. And finally, I'd like to say, they had media in Egypt, too, Western media included, that used the same techniques, and it didn't stop the people's revolution at all.
Okay, let's talk about Wall Street being the main target of the protests. I mean, could Washington become the target? I mean, if we're talking about the financial crisis, it was the government who did give a lifeline to these bailouts to these banks and bankers. Do you think people would turn their attention there? Or why are they?
Well, on October 6th, this Thursday, they are turning their attention there. There's going to be a massive rally that's linked to all of these other rallies around the country taking place in Washington beginning Thursday, and they say they're staying there until they see change.
Okay, well, thanks very much for your insight there. Don DeBar, activist and journalist, talking to us live from New York City. Thank you.
Thank you very much.